I get hung if I do this.
Good, maybe it'll be
Yeah.
short.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sure can. I was asked if we could start the meeting with a flag salute. Would you like to lead it, John? Sure.
All right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John.
I don't know.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for coming in for today's meeting. It's a little bit different having a meeting that's kind of scattered across the country and zooming in and all this neat stuff, but it's amazing what you can get done if you need to. I'd like to start with self-introductions. Jerry, if you-
Jerry Hall.
Chief David Bear. John Hollis. Michael Knight. Javier Sanchez.
can't really see in the back.
Tony Moore.
Maria?
Jan Kovars.
Margaret Stinson.
John Simonich.
And I'm John Billieu. Again, thanks all for coming. This is where we open up for oral communications. If there's any public comment. Doesn't appear to be any. We get right into scheduled matters. First thing on there is review of Measure H. As we talked about last time, we changed it up a little bit, and we teamed people together. We had liaisons between the committee and their opposing counterpart. And so I'd like to start with Jerry and have you begin with the safety.
I met with Chief Crodel, and we went through pretty much item by item, line by line. And once again, I'm just totally amazed at the efficiency of the police department and the accounting of the city on how they take care of business. Everything was, we didn't find anything that was inappropriate, that was excessive, and as always, everything was right where it was supposed to be. It was a long meeting, but it was very productive in that everything is as it should be.
Good. Good. Eric, was there anything you'd like to add to that? Is Eric there?
He's trying to talk, but we don't.
If it was a microphone, I'd tell him he'd have to push the little button on the side of it.
No,
but-
we can't hear you on our end. We were having some technical issues on, I believe it's going to be a Zoom issue.
Okay. Maybe we can come back to it and finish up before we have a discussion in motion. Next would be fire with Sean. Sean.
Sean's not here. Sean and I had a meeting also after he had a meeting with Chief Lapierre. And there was just a couple of things that Sean had, that he had noted, but nothing was inappropriate and everything was as it should be. And as with the police department, the fire department is doing an outstanding job in keeping everything within budget.
Chief, would you like to add anything to that?
Just that it's been a challenging year, and finance is always challenging every year, and we do necessarily propose we have. Really appreciate the breakout meeting with the individual instead of doing it in a committee, kind of thing like that. I think it was a very efficient way to do it and streamlines the whole process.
Good.
Once you spend some individual time with somebody. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
And it makes it easier to cover each item.
Margaret, like to talk about the library?
You know, I can't hear you. You're too muffled.
I'm sorry. Would you like to give a report on the library?
Pardon?
Would you like to give a report on the library?
Yep. Okay. I'm going to take this down.
Absolutely.
I've been staying in touch with the library all this time. They're doing the best they can. If anybody wants to see a picture of the mobile library, I have one on my phone. They're hoping to get that in operation by January, and it'll go around to the schools. They're planning for the new library, but it's just going to take time. And I know that the city is missing the library desperately. I hear people tell me all the time, I want to go to the library and it's not there. So we need to get it up and running as quickly as possible.
Okay. All right. And then John, we had on streets, John, he's Solier.
Yes. I spoke with both Mike and Javier from Public Works. The gentlemen have yet to spend any of the money allotted to them from Measure H or Measure I, as you can take a look in the document on page 84. There has been no expenditures from their departments as of yet.
Okay. And is there a time when is scheduled, like for next year, to use start using the monies, or is there kind of an update on that we can get from?
I can speak to the street maintenance portion.
Okay.
I can speak to the street maintenance portion. So we're just trying to get staff up to speed on the hot mix overlay portion. That's 400,000 allocated. There's 295,000 in the Measure I fund for staffing and budgetary operations. And so we're getting that ironed out with the COVID and the year challenging. We've actually got the regular staff up to speed, and we're in recruitment now for additional staff. And we have had expenditures as it relates to other street projects that involve Measure I funds from a project-related standpoint.
Okay. Chief Croder, are you back with us?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
We can now. Is there anything you'd like to add to Jerry's report?
No. Like you said, we spent a long time, and I certainly appreciate his time. It went longer than we thought, but he's been willing to stay as long as it took, and I think it went well. We were able to not just go over the process, what we did, but kind of the process on how we define things. So I do definitely appreciate his time.
Good, very good. Is there any further discussion on the reports that have been given for review of Measure H? Seeing none, is there a motion for passage or whatever? Someone can make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept it.
John makes a motion, Simonich makes a motion. All those in favor, say aye.
I second it.
Oh, thanks for seconding that. I always miss that part. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor, say nay. Passes. Measure I is basically the same thing. It's two separate measures, but those are really covered with the discussions that you have with Measure H. So at this point in time, unless there's additional discussion that somebody would like to put out there for Measure I, is there? Seeing none, I would suggest we go ahead and go to the motion. Would someone like to make a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion to accept. This is John Angel speaking.
Thank you, John.
This is Josh Soulier. I will second the motion.
Thank you, Josh. Those in favor, say aye.
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 Those against, say nay. Passes. The next item on it, item 3, is review of the fiscal 2021, 2020-21 measures I and H draft. John Lawless, if you'd like to speak on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me begin by saying thank you to the committee for your participation this evening and your patience and your collaboration with the department heads, those that were the liaisons. I heard Chief Crodel and other Chief Lapierre and Mr. Sanchez, Mr. Knight, all thank Mr. Moore, all thank for the opportunity to engage with members of the committee and culminating in tonight's meeting. Candidly, we're 6 months behind, and a lot has happened in that 6 months. I would tell you from a city staff perspective, it's felt like a bit of a car crash that is kind of in slow motion and keeps continuing. And obviously beginning with the library fire in February, followed by COVID, and now a significant part of the city's forces affected by the fires that are occurring across California. In fact, the city council had an emergency meeting earlier today authorizing the sports complex to be a camp for significant numbers of California National Guard that are being assigned to this area to help with the Sequoia complex fire. So I've heard the word resiliency used, and I will echo that. There are many days that it's been challenging to come to work, but it's because there are remarkable people here that I get to work with that makes that lift that much easier. As I say, many hands make for an easier opportunity. COVID and the library fire both kind of put a significant impact in terms of how the city's budget would be developed. And so the city council took an action, and councils have taken this action in before when they want to have a better sense of what the budgetary assumptions would be for its development, to postpone that until October 1st. And so instead of us having this conversation generally in the May timeframe, we're doing so here in September in preparation for October's adoption. So wanted to speak about what is proposed for the, which will be proposed before the city council in October. And wanted no actions needed, but wanted this to be a collaborative conversation, talk about the challenges being faced by the city and what are recommendations that are proposed to be made, which would like any feedback from the committee that would be helpful in the presentation to the city council in October, or any concerns that it may have. Beginning with, and what I would say is that your departments, and it was reflected in the comments from your liaisons, is that they do a remarkable job in managing and trying to find opportunities for efficiency and how to get more done with less. Even though you may see budget appropriations increase, that the hope is that the product that you have on the as the outcome is enhanced. And so as we close this fiscal year right now, we are, even though, and you'll see in your revenue projections that does not look like sales tax was dramatically affected for this as we finished out the prior fiscal year, but there is forecasts of a 10% decrease in sales tax receipts, which has been addressed in the budget. The effects of that in Measure H is $435,000, and in Measure I is $840,000. And I'll speak separately to the two different measures because they're affected a little bit differently. In Measure H, Again, speaking about the 10% reduction, we do have a reserve, which is estimated at 1.7 million right now. One of the recommendations in the budget is that appropriations, both in the general fund and in Measure H, continue as if the library were here, as there is efforts that are underway as we speak to establish an interim library that will serve this community for a number of years. For the sake of this conversation, why don't we say 5? And in that time, as a new facility is where it is, what it is, designed and then constructed, is probably going to be in a it's going to be, I'm going to just be candid, probably a 4 to 5 year time frame. The focus this year on the new facility will be where and what. And then once the question of where and what is answered, then design and construction. And so in the meantime, wanting to ensure, as committee member Stinson indicated, wanting to try to get a physical presence in the community. And so that will be, we're hoping to have that, I would say, operational in the spring. There is a location that we are in lease negotiations with that would have improvement. It's already a constructed building. There would need to be improvements made to it to bring it to a standard of serving the public. And an important component of that, and this is where Measure H kind of comes into effect as well as the general fund, is that some of those costs are going to be addressed in fire insurance proceeds, and some of that's going to be costs to the city. And so ensuring that as these budgets are being proposed to the city council, that they are for 2 reasons. One, to ensure that there is monies available and funds available for those costs that are not covered by insurance proceeds. And then secondly, it's going to be an important reminder as a new facility. I think in some of the challenging times that we're in right now, if let's say you removed $500,000 from library operations, it's easy to forget that cost is there. And then when a new facility is operational, then there will be this, we need to come up with that $500,000, or at that time probably 750 or whatever that number is. So from a budget continuity standpoint and planning for that future facility, it's recommended that we keep the general fund appropriation and the Measure H appropriations accordingly. Recognizing they may not have those full expenditures. If let's say there's $1.3 million appropriated for library between the general fund and Measure H, is it likely that we are to spend all of those funds? No. But it is a good reminder of what those, from budgetarily, what the operational costs are of those, so that when those costs need to be realized, literally in a new facility, or even in some of those in the interim facility, that those funds are available. On the capital side of Measure H, there was funds programmed, sadly, for a library restroom remodel that was undergoing at the time of the fire. And so funds that have been set aside in Measure H, now that project is I would say, no longer. And so it's proposed that those funds just be unallocated, I would say, from that project that isn't feasible right now and go back into the Measure H reserve. But that being said, there may be some of those projects that may be looked at in the interim as additional opportunities. Ms. Stinson talked about a mobile library. There was a cost share on the behalf of the city, to which it is paying, the general fund is paying that. Measure H is, the general fund with the match on that, right, or on the mobile library? Yeah, paying for the whole thing. Oh, paying for the whole thing. Yeah, we had a in-kind match is what I would say, but we're looking at, there may be projects that come forward that perhaps maybe Measure H projects in support of library literacy. What we're looking at right now is, to the extent that we can utilize fire proceeds, and I want to be very clear about something, that there are separate pots that happen through this process. There was remediation of City Hall, there was remediation of the site, there is a
a pot for interim operations, there's a pot for books and those sorts of things, and then there's a pot for the ultimate facility. All of them are separate. When you use from this one does not mean you're using from this one. So they're all categorized, I would say. In fact, the city council's made it a point that as funds and proceeds come into the city, that they be restricted in those specific areas as they're being allocated. And I would say funds that have been allocated thus far to the city is approximately $5 million. My anticipation will be when 5 years from now, let's say, when we look back on this, it will probably be in the $40 to $50 million. That is my anticipation. We have in the capital improvement program budget a $30 million estimate for a new library facility. So within Measure H, it looks very similar. And from an importance standpoint, that just be a reminder, this is what the operations look like. There may not be the actual expenditures to match that budget, but we also track those, obviously those expenditures. And so just want to be clear about that's why it's proposed that way. Is it expected that we have the expenditures at that level? It's not, candidly, but is, like I said, it's a good budgetary tool looking forward. Measure I, and I have to credit a number of different folks looking at how to leverage Measure I to sustain the organization and actually do more. The city is fortunate. There are a number of cities that are now going to the ballot box to try to do a Measure I equivalent because of what they see as declining revenues. The Central Valley's been a little bit, as I talk to my colleagues across the state, certainly your tourist destinations have been more adversely affected economically, given loss of revenue from tourism and those sorts of things. The Central Valley's been a little bit not as severely impacted, given it's not the necessarily a tourist destination that some of your coastal cities were and are, but it doesn't go without its challenges. The comment was about Measure I in the streets. So we have well over $30 million in streets are currently under design. You have and what we're finding, and we'll be curious to see what the new environment looks like, bidding environment looks like for streets. Henderson Avenue, which is going under reconstruction right now, was awarded at $9 million. That's you want to know what $9 million looks like in street reconstruction? That's what you see out there right now. We're out to bid right now for Newcomb reconstruction between Olive and Morton, and we'll see what those bid. I'm really curious to see what that bidding environment looks like right now. So we have a number of projects that are under design, and the good news is that Measure I we're saving those funds. If you look on your balance sheet, it will show that there's over $7 million in reserve, I would say, under Measure I. There really isn't, because there was an appropriation of $3 million for streets, of which only about $300,000 was expended as part of the design efforts this year. If those funds are being carried over, you're looking at a $4 million construction project next fiscal year that is under design right now, and I'll use Villa as an example. So Villa is going to be reconstructed between Olive Avenue and Henderson. Olive Villa, including a new bridge crossing, because you have a unsafe bridge crossing at north of Putnam. So there'll be a new bridge crossing as well as the reconstruction of Villa, and it's approximately a $4 million project. So you can see how quickly, though you may have those funds appropriated, it will be expended as part of that project. And then collectively, as I shared, there's upwards of $30 million currently under design right now, and as I call it, equated to airplanes arriving at LAX. They are all under design, and they're going to land, and they're going to be segmented. You have Main Street that is under design, looking to begin construction, first phase of its construction next fiscal year. That's $1 million a phase, so $1 million just to go from Morton to Putnam Main Street is going to be $1 million, and that's separated into 3 separate phases. So these funds are accumulated, design is done, and then spent. And so what I would say is that there is about, as you look at your balance sheet, about $3 million in unallocated or unappropriated funds from Measure I from the, as this measure became effective in April of 2019 and to where through June 30th. Please recall that there are streets that have been programmed against that once they go to construction, those funds will be spent down. In the Newcomb project, there's a $400,000 curb gutter, sidewalk, street light improvements on 2 of the streets. We have a number of county areas that have been annexed, and this is putting in public improvements in those areas that are just, especially in connecting West Putnam School to Newcomb, which has high pedestrian activity on it. So both Toma and Putnam are receiving curb gutter, sidewalk, street light improvements to them as part of that project. And Measure I is a $400,000 contributor to that project. The city was a beneficiary of significant federal CARES Act funds in transportation, receiving upwards close to $10 million in CARES Act funding. The city had positioned itself, and the credit goes to Mr. Knight and Mr. Rich Tree for having advanced our transit system to the furthest ahead in Tulare County, and leveraging federal grants, state grants, air quality grants, working with California, our utility, California Edison as an early adopter, that we're able to take these funds that were set aside for transit or transportation and convert it into LTF money, and to do street reconstructions. And so what's proposed there is that, and maximum is $2 million, because that's what the operational costs are of transit, is to take that, and the City Council has already authorized the conversion of that for road reconstruction, is to ensure that the Measure H projects that have been set aside make sure that they happen. And that's $2 million a year over the next 3 years for $6 million in total. That allows additional support for public safety in the general fund. I'm just going to be candid on the general fund side of things, as we are looking at additional personnel that's being brought on in the police and fire department, and new vehicles. And in the replacement of those. The city's had a very, it's one of the few cities that has this, actually, if you look around, where we depreciate all of our rolling stock, so that when a piece of equipment has run its useful life, you don't sit in a budget meeting saying, I need $500,000 next year for a new fire truck. We set aside those funds, we depreciate them over what is considered their useful life. We actually extend them even more. We don't, just because you have the money in the bank to replace that vehicle, we make an analysis every year. Does this need to be replaced? Can we get another year out of it? After we've depreciated, that's a bit of how we have savings at a department level. But those funds are then reserved there so that you can make that replacement when you need to do it. And we do that with all of our rolling stock. And we do that with some of our equipment. We do that with our computers. All of these things are depreciated, have an account set aside for each of their replacements. And so in the Measure I proposed budget, we're using a revenue estimate of $7 million. We are proposing increases. The budget that was approved by the council this year and for the prior year had the police department at about $2.5 million, the fire department and streets at $3 million out of the $6 million. Receipts came in well. We were having a great year. I think receipts at the year's end are going to be something in the magnitude of 7.1 to 7.2 million. So we are looking at a reduction based on that 10%, back to 7 million. We are looking to increase the document in front of you says 3.3 million to the PD. Some of that is what we call carryover from the prior year, so it was authorized in the prior, we just hadn't hired the people yet, so you don't buy the car until you have the people. So this is a matter of kind of getting caught up with the implementation plan in the police department. In the fire department, we have, as part of the library fire, a number of investigations that are going on. I would say there are at least 4. You have OSHA, you have NIOSH, our chief asked for what's called a SART. So you have a number of these investigations that will be helpful in looking at how to ensure that kind of incident doesn't happen again anywhere. And so we have put some numbers in there that I think there's 100,000 that we've indicated out of Measure I that would be to implement if there's any particular training, equipment, things of that nature. It's really unspecified, but again, it's just a number that's been indicated as kind of, we don't know what that is yet. But we know there's going to be recommendations, and it would be good to have an appropriation of something there to assist that. I've also indicated, and it's already been telegraphed, and you probably know this well, those of you that lived in Porterville longer than I, and I've been here almost 25 years now. So we rely on ourselves. We are 30 minutes from Tulare, we're an hour from Bakersfield, we're 45 minutes from Visalia. When it goes bad, we have only ourselves to look for. And so there's going to be recommendations for additional fire personnel because we can't rely on anybody else. We have to rely on ourselves. And the standards of the personnel that are available, we're going to have to increase our personnel per shift. And right now, I can tell you Chief Lapierre is working with his staff, his executive staff, on what an implementation and plan looks like. But I would anticipate that being something not in this fiscal year, and it's not built into this, but I did want to give you, to be candid and to be fully transparent with that. We do anticipate that, and and I'm just going to give you a magnitude of $1 million a year. But there's ways to get to there, and those are some of there's potential grants that can be leveraged and those sorts of things to help transition the city over a period of time to be able to assist that. And I think there's a lot of thought and a lot of purpose that's being demonstrated right now by the fire department as we look at what that personnel increase looks like. And I think Measure I is going to play a critical role in the implementation of that once those investigations are complete and when the recommendations have been provided. Speaking of the fire department, we're blessed. I know that the Battalion Chief Bull is here. We've been blessed to have a number of personnel join this department to write the next chapter of the city's fire story. And some very high caliber folks that I hope that you get to meet over succeeding meetings. But we're very pleased to have Battalion Chief Bullard join us from City of Hanford. Battalion Chief Cogburn right now is on a fire. He came to us from the City of Tulare. And we've had the opportunity, and 2 of your battalion chiefs that have come from within the department. So, and we've had the opportunity to hire a captain out of Kern County Fire who's well regarded as well. So we've been able to, it hasn't come without our stresses right now. I know the chief, we have 5 folks that are out on PTSD right now. We have 8 out on fire assignment, 9 on fire assignment? 8. So 8. So a lot of, but here's what I want to say, and it's, they're all covering each other because they understand the mission. And so I can't say enough about the job that Chief Lapierre and his executive team and all of the department personnel have done to carry the city the last 6 months, and will carry the city for years to come. And I was already an exemplary department, ISO level 2 department, which puts you in the top 1% of fire departments in the United States. We feel that in time we'll be a ISO level 1, which puts you in the top 100 fire departments in the United States, just not 1% of 25,000, but in the top 100. And so it's the commitments to training, to the personnel. Doesn't go without saying to the water department. They work very closely together with fire to ensure there's adequate water supply. We have those conversations all the time. So all that just to say, in Measure I, it will be, when the voter survey was done, its priority was public safety. Talking about emergency 911 response. And so I think Measure I will provide that blueprint and provide that path forward for enhancing public safety, police and fire specifically in the years to come. We have additional, there's a project in there, and this is an example of where we're able to leverage transit grant, federal CARES Act money, which, like I said, we got about 10 million in total. 6 million we've allocated to road reconstruction, which you see reflected in the Measure I as putting that as a Measure I revenue. The remainder of that, one of the projects we're looking at is called signal preemption. We have a number of signals in this community where there's technology on an engine. Not all of our engines have this, but some of them where they can turn the signal green so that you don't have to make an unsafe maneuver. And I know it's achieved, you've got a $65,000 project indicating we want to upgrade, because a number of our engines still are in their useful life, and the investment would be a good one. All of our new equipment comes already with this, but we're going to partner that with the CARES Act funding that we received for transit to make those, to do the signal preemption equipment on more of our signals. We have 50, how many signals do we have? How many do we have? So we got 55 signals, and we've got 12 of them that have, 12 intersections have this equipment on it. So, and those, so that's one of the projects that we're looking at allocating those transit dollars to upgrade. And the net benefit is the response time will go up with the fire department being able to respond in a more quick fashion to both medical aids and fire response. So I talked a lot. Does the committee have any questions that you might have about next year? It's going to be a trying one. It has been a trying year, but again, as I shared, I work with a remarkable group of folks who show up every day. You know, Lou Gehrig is my idol, I guess you could say. You know, showed up to work every day, did his job, did it very well, and was happy with somebody else getting the credit, right? Babe Ruth, everyone knows who Babe Ruth is. Not as many people wouldn't know who Lou Gehrig was if there wasn't a disease named after him. But I'm blessed to work with a group of people that have that same mentality. Come to work, do it very well, work very hard, and don't seek the credit for it. And so this gives me a rare opportunity to really express my appreciation to each of them for all that they do. Maria Bemis does an amazing job in the books. She knows almost where every penny is. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I'm open and candid and transparent about what we're facing.
Questions?
It's all good.
John, I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. And I can't express enough my appreciation to you as the committee for your patience and your support as we build a new library, as we open an interim library, as we try, how do we serve this community better, you know, leave it better, I use this phrase, leave it better today than you found it. And so how do we leave this community better? And Measure I, Measure H, and this committee will be an important part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Well, that was quite a report. There was a lot A lot of stuff to think about in that.
I'd like to make a comment if I could. This is John Angel speaking.
Go ahead, John.
I'd just like to express my personal appreciation for everything that John and the city is doing. These are really, truly unprecedented times that we're living in. I certainly understand that, given that I work in the healthcare industry. But, you know, you've dealt with a lot more challenges than just COVID at the city. And I think everything that John, you're doing down at the city and all the staff down there, the fire department, the police department, every department really is really, you know, making it happen in super, super difficult circumstances. You know, just appreciate everything that you guys are doing. We're really blessed to have a team of Lou Gehrigs. Not very many institutions can say that they got a whole team of Lou Gehrigs out there. So thank you for everything that you all are doing.
Thank you. Comments? That takes us to other matters. That's kind of an open time for anything anybody'd like to bring up or discuss. I do have some comments I'd like to make. As everybody's keenly aware, there's been a lot of tragedy and fire all around us, all over the state. And it's a tough time, not just for the people up there fighting it and risking their lives, but for the people that have had to leave up there and leave all their time and treasure and, you know, tradition and a lot of family memories and things going up there. And it's just a really, really hard time. And it's amazing, especially in this community, how it comes together with everybody else. To chime in a little bit with what John English just said, and how proud it is to be a part of this community, that we can all work together as one. There's not very many communities. There are all kinds of problems out there now. People are fussing over not much or misguided and causing issues. You don't see that in Porterville. You see people coming together to help each other out. And that's truly what a community is. And I'm just really proud to be a part of that. And Dave, I appreciate all your guys' help up on the hill. It's a tough job. That's all I have to say. Anybody else? Do we need to come up with our next meeting? It should be sometime in November. Anybody have suggestions?
I don't have my calendar.
I want to make sure we stay away from Thanksgiving. So I believe Thanksgiving is on the 26th, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So,
The 18th,
let's see here.
it would be the third Wednesday of the month.
I'm good with that. Does the 18th work for everybody?
What day of the week is that?
We good on the 18th then? Anybody challenge on it? Okay, the 18th it is. Is there anything else anybody would like to say before I close the meeting? Thank you very much for your time, and Fernando, thanks for putting all the stuff together. Really, I like this neat little hammer.
Day of the week is that?
Meeting's adjourned.